guys. Sorry for the extra wait. I had to go retrieve my ice pack. My back is still bothering me a little bit, but I'm here and comfy. So, alright. Let me just get stuff sorted over here. Sorry about that. Flip that to dark mode. There's a reason I usually do dark mode on like everything. Okay, and yes, I'm wearing the SWTOR shirt today. Alright, yeah, so I initially wasn't sure how I was going to feel today, because I am still sick. I am starting to recover thanks to the medication, but I am feeling better, so I decided that I would give it a try and see how we do. So my plan this evening is to read chapters 8, 9, and 10, so it should fill up the 2 hours. And I also had a little bit of a surprise for people. I'm gonna actually turn the music down just a little because it's actually competing with my voice. So I'm gonna turn the music down just a little bit. I did have a surprise for you guys that I will talk about here in a minute. But I will need to get something set up for that. So just give me a minute here while I try and get that sorted out. All right. Okay. So I think I have something going for the surprise that I was talking about. I will just have to do it manually because unfortunately I didn't have enough time to get it actually set up to work on stream. Yeah, I was otherwise occupied today. Actually went back to bed for a while, which I needed desperately. Sleep is actually one of the best medicines when you're not feeling well. Extra sleep and lots of water are definitely your friend when you're trying to get better. So I have been drinking lots and lots of water and sleeping as much as my body will allow me to in amongst all of the nerve pain that I'm dealing with. But it's easing a little, so that's a plus. So tonight I will be reading chapter 7, 8, and 9. Give me just 2 seconds while I try and get something sorted here. Sorry, technical things going on. I'm trying to use a new closed captioning thing, so I'm not sure if it's actually gonna work or not. Let's see. I'm gonna pull up my stream real quick to see if it's actually working. Sorry guys, you know, technical stuff going on here, so sorry. Alright, let's see. actually working. Well, I don't know if that's gonna work, so I'm gonna try it the other way. Sorry. Let's see. Okay. I don't know if that's gonna work for you guys or not. Sorry. I usually use something different. I decided to try something that was recommended by people. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm gonna do this one. Okay. Let's see. Alright. Okay. So it does appear to be somewhat working. If you guys can see the closed captioning, please let me know. It's still something that I am working on. So I am trying to make sure it works. It's something new. Well, not new, but I'm trying a different version of it, so it might be a little twitchy. So, alright. Okay. Alrighty. Let me get sorted here. So sorry for the wait. Okay. I'm actually gonna turn the music down just a smidge. Because it got loud again. Alright. Okay. Thank you, Shadow, for hanging out. I appreciate you. I'm just gonna kind of take it easy this evening. We'll see how far we get before I run out of energy. So we may get through 2 chapters, we may get through all 3. It really depends on how I'm feeling and how my energy is. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright. Okay. So we're starting this evening with chapter 8 because we ended last time with chapter 7. Also, before I actually get started, I just want to let you guys know that I did have to cancel my stream for next Wednesday, which was going to be SWTOR, because something came up related to my trip for August that needed to be handled. So I unfortunately will be unable to stream next Wednesday. I will try and do a stream at some other point during the week to kind of get that stream in, but I can't make any guarantees. It's going to be a little crazy. So I will keep you guys apprised, and if you're in the Discord, please make sure you are checking for any updates there. So alright. Chapter 8. Okay. Okay. Sorry, still trying to get stuff sorted apparently. Okay. Get some. Alrighty. Chapter 8. And do let me know if my audio levels are a bit weird. I'm playing around with levels and positioning for the mic, so just let me know if it's a bit weird. I do apologize if you're hearing AC or anything else like that. Not much I can do about it. Sorry. Need to not melt, so it's kind of important. Alright. Chapter 8. Ari cried herself to sleep the second night she stayed alone on Livda. She had postponed her departure date due to the inclement weather that seemed to be plaguing Livda's fair-weather Jovian orbit. She missed Mick profoundly, and now that she was 7 months pregnant, she wished she could muster an apology and hear the sound of his voice again. Her pride, however, would not let her. He had offended her position and career, and she felt that her husband would never understand. The dark nightmares of the Sith haunted her dreams once more, and again she awoke with a start, finding herself alone with her 2 hounds in her bedroom. She would depart the following day if the severe thunderstorms ceased. Mercure, a few days later. Force, damn those things! Ari cursed aloud as she stepped off her transport and was hit by the coldness in the Force as the Force left her senses. Her former stepbrother, Admiral Thrawn, had come to Mercure years before to use the Ysalamiri to capture Luke Skywalker. Now, she was gathering the lizards to defeat the Sith. Curse my stepbrother forever, having set foot on this wretched planet. She landed on Mercure with room enough in her transport ship to hold at least 2,000 of the Ysalamiri with nutrient frames to accompany them. Now I just have to gather the damn things, she thought. Slinging a backpack over her shoulder, a lightsaber on her belt, and a blaster in the holster at her hip. She began to walk into the deep forest to locate the Force-denying lizards that she needed to take back to Ithor. The air was hot and oppressive, like the mood hanging over him for the past month. Ari had yet to show, and they'd been waiting long enough. He didn't like it, but this had to be done now to get everyone's attention. Mikron Din rose from his knees on the cargo hold of the Firebird. The rogue wore full Jedi attire for the first time since he was a Padawan. His undertunic and pants were charcoal gray, and his boots were black like the night sky. The cloak he wore over the ensemble was the deepest of blacks, and yet, in the folds, one could see tiny specks of light like stars in the blanket of space. He carried no blaster. His lightsaber hung at his side, the only piece of technology on his person. The gray and black had meaning he only hoped others would understand. Purposefully, he strode down the ramp with the Firebird and into the heat of Ithor. The planet cried in pain as it struggled to heal. The ground was black beneath his boots, and cinders drifted through the air. The place sucked the moisture out of everything that lived, and something inside Mikron cried out at the thought of what this place once was. He could hear the ghosts of the before trees singing a lament on the wind. The Mother Jungle's spirit cradled the wounded planet and wept. Mikron knew the Jedi were also feeling this wound, and he was counting on it. The air burned in his lungs, and he didn't shunt the pain. He needed to feel what had been done to this world. They all did. Give me just 1 second here while I make the text bigger because I'm blind. Okay, there we go. He entered the mouth of the cave, and the relatively cool air revitalized his aching lungs. Jedi went about the place, trying to make it livable and comfortable, but mostly they were just trying to stay busy. The council had gathered at the back of the cave, conversing in hushed tones. The Jedi that Mick had rescued, including the council, didn't know why he had brought them here. The arrival of Stefan, Aner, Callista, Zan, and Turlon had eased some of their anxiety and annoyance, but not all of it. "Your presence is requested," Mick called out above the drone of conversation. "All of you, please, follow me. Bring only yourselves and your lightsabers, no other forms of technology. It is but a short walk to where we are going. Respirators will only insulate you from Ithor's pain. We need to feel that, all of us." At first, nobody moved. The council members turned to each other and began talking again in hushed tones. The other Jedi in the cavern looked uncertain. A great sadness welled up inside the rogue, and not for the first time he questioned why he was even here. Master Din speaks the truth, he heard Stefan's voice ring out above the background noise. The Katani moved to stand at Mick's right, and he threw the rogue a wink. I shall go with him. Thank you, friend, Mick whispered. What have you got up your unusually formal sleeve? Something important, the rogue answered. It could be the difference between defeat and victory in this war. I will go as well, Einar called as he joined Mick and Stefan at the mouth of the cavern. I still think you're an egotistical hotshot, nerf herder, Einar whispered. But even you can have a moment of insight now and again. I'm flattered, Mikron whispered. I still think you're a pompous, straight-edge Jedi, so I guess we're even. I shall follow as well, Turlan's voice rang out as the knight joined the trio at the entrance, as I believe we all should. One by one, the Jedi in the cavern gathered near the entrance to the cave, leaving behind their respirators and other gear. Eventually, everyone was gathered, including the whole of the council. Thank you all, Mikron solemnly said. Follow me. Do not shunt the pain as we travel. It hurts. As Ithor hurts. The trek was a short one by Mikron's standards. The Jedi struggled as they walked. Their eyes watered and their lungs burned as the pain spread through the whole of the group like ripples in a pond. But soon they were at their destination, and lungs, eyes, and souls were given respite from the pain. In a small valley just beyond the edge of a cliff, there's a small grove of young before trees. It was a sight to behold. Amidst a barren, black, and lifeless landscape, an oasis of life stood. The living trees grew around a small pond in the center of the basin. As the Jedi cleared the tree line, they entered an Ithor that many had long since thought dead. The pond was cool and calm, and it reflected the stars overhead. The ground was soft and fertile, and grass grew in the space between the trees. Mick nodded to Stefan, who took the cue and set off around the pond opposite Mick. The Jedi followed suit, and were soon in a complete circle around the water. Mick waited a moment for everyone to get settled before he spoke. Can you feel it? The rogue asked. Can you feel the heartbeat of this place? Ithor was destroyed in a day. The life of the Mother Jungle ended painfully and violently. You felt her pain as we walked to this place, but that was a mere taste of what she has gone through. She is healing slowly, but she is. We stand amid the only living before trees on Ithor. They are young, but can you not feel their strength? Life grows anew from the ashes of a tragedy, and is stronger for it. Mick briefly let those words ring out around the pond as he drew on the Force. Sometimes you have to suffer. Sometimes you have to endure. Sometimes someone has to die so that others may live. Pain, death, tragedy. These things that we try so hard to avoid are the things that make us stronger. This grove is a testament to that fact. Stretch out in the Force. You will find that this small patch of green on a dead planet is more alive than any other world in this galaxy. There is a good chance that we will lose the coming war, Mikron continued. But it is one we must fight, nonetheless. And it is one that only we can fight. The forces of the New Republic cannot be involved. This is a war between the Jedi and the Sith, and to involve the innocent is a crime that I cannot permit. This is a Force war. The Force is seeking balance once again. As such, only those attuned to the Force will fight in it. We are few, but we must meet the Sith regardless. This war is necessary. It is the Ithor of the Force. From this tragedy, new life will flourish and be stronger. Mick released a calming breath before taking his lightsaber from his belt and holding it as so the blade would be over the water when it was ignited. A long time ago, when the Jedi fought to defend this world, there was a ceremony held here on the jungle floor. The ceremony allowed the Jedi to set foot in the Mother Jungle. As part of that ritual, each person had to renounce something about themselves as a sign of humility and recognition that they were only one part of a much greater whole. What's left of the jungle has accepted us here today, but this ceremony should still be repeated. All of us, myself included, must remember that we are mere specks in the grander scheme of things. We are no more significant than the flit gnats that buzz in the trees or the worms beneath the earth. By giving up a part of ourselves, we will become more in tune with the Force, and I believe that we will be ready for the Force war that approaches. Sorry, getting comfy. Oh. I'm slouching and shrimping. Trying not to do that. So if you see me slouching, please tell me. Alrighty. I will go first, but please jump in whenever you feel impressed. Take your time and feel it out, Micron instructed. I renounce pride. It is one thing to say that I am insignificant, it is another to believe it. I feel that since I've returned, there have been times when I've allowed my pride to get the better of me, and because of it, I have lost something. No longer shall I let my vanity dictate my actions. We are all equal through the Force. Here today, I acknowledge and accept that. Micron Din ignited his silver blade and held it out over the water. In the Force, I trust. Stefan stepped forward so his fellow Jedi could see him. He stood there for a long moment, pondering his life before him. He looked into the pond and into the faces of those he had led into battle and would join with them again. He stayed there for quite some time longer before he finally broke the silence. For many years I've led this great host, and for many years we have been tested repeatedly, he said as he held his lightsaber out in front of him. This is yet another. For many, it will be our final test, and I am honored to be among you at this moment in time. He paused, and the silence was deafening as he made his vow. I renounce responsibility. For a long time, I believed the safety of this galaxy was my burden because of the actions I have taken. To make these worlds more peaceful for my children, for my grandchild to grow up without having to face what we have. But it isn't my responsibility alone. It is all of ours, and I freely share it with you now. He pressed the button, and the blue silver blade came alive with a loud snap hiss that echoed in the canyon as he whispered, "So say we all." Others in the circle repeated his words, and echoes of "so say we all" could be heard. Einar took a step closer to the pond. His lungs were burning, but he didn't care. He felt the mother jungle, and she was in pain. She fought to heal herself. She was strong, but she wasn't angry. She had been hurt, but she felt no hate. Einar looked at his reflection in the pond and saw the scar lining his face, the scar Bane had given him. I renounce my anger. At first, it made me stronger, more powerful to deal with the death of my wife, but it only weakened me, drawing me apart from my friends, my life. I know many of you are uncertain about me being here after what I did, and you deserve to be cautious, but now I fully surrender myself to the Force and renounce my anger. He ignited his lightsaber and watched the pond reflect green and blue, making it almost magical. In the Force, I trust. One by one, around the pond, Jedi renounced bits of themselves and ignited their blades. As each Jedi let that little piece of themselves die, the group as a whole became stronger. The Force swirled in the small grove, and the water rippled before them. A veritable rainbow of colors shone and reflected— Oops. Sorry, I'm gonna stop there. 'Cause there's an ad. So sorry. I will take the opportunity to take a drink. So, I do try to pay attention to the ads, but sometimes I get in the groove. So, for those of you who are subscribed and don't see the ads, thank you. And I also appreciate your patience as we work through the ads so that people who are not subscribed can still listen to the content. So just bear with me for another 50 seconds, and we'll be back to reading. Also, if you think that I need to take a drink of water, or stretch, or get a snack, which is what I'm doing right now, some of those are commands. Some of them are also channel point redeems, so please check those out on the About panels. It should... The list of commands should be down in the About panels, and the channel point commands should be accessible at the bottom of the chat. So please feel free to use either one. I do try to keep track of those. And we're back from our ad. Cool. Alright. Okay. I'm setting my snack aside so that we can get back to reading. Now that we're back from our ad, thank you for hanging out through those ads. I appreciate that. Alright. Ooh, I see a couple more people that snuck in. Hello, Critter. And Sigma. And, now, if you're... I think I've seen you here before. Welcome. Alright. So let me get back to where we were. Okay. I have to back up a little bit because I was reading as the ad started. The force swirled in the small grove, and the water rippled before them. A veritable rainbow of colors shone and reflected in the broken waves as the Jedi held their blades above the pond. Sorry. When every Jedi had their blade in the air, Mikron nodded and closed his own down so that the blade disappeared. I want to thank you all, Mikron called out above the hum of the multiple lightsabers. We have felt Ithor's pain and found her strength. Now we face our own tragedy. Aboard the Firebird. Where did you even get those robes? Stefan asked from across the hollow table in the lounge of the Firebird. Aenir sipped at some caf, and Turlon sat at the comm station, setting up the feed for the Council of War. To everyone's joy and surprise, Callista and Zan had arrived from their mission, having heard of the troubles in the galaxy, and they'd brought friends. The night before, they had dropped out of hyperspace above Ithor with an old Moncal cruiser in their midst. The Mandalorians had heard of the Jedi's plight and wished them a fair fight. They gave the Jedi the Moncal cruiser before returning to wherever they'd been hiding. Mick was rather pleased with the present, as the whole of the Jedi Council could fit aboard her, and he could fly the Firebird without risking more lives than he had to. In the Moncal cruiser's hangar was another surprise, and Mick was almost giddy when he was told of the entire squadron of XJ-3s in the old warship. I've had them since before you were born, pal, Mick grinned, now wearing his familiar freighter captain's vest, black pants, and boots, and his white shirt. I figured they were more appropriate for what I wanted to accomplish the other night. Stefan merely shrugged. You looked almost respectable, the Katani said. Mick shivered. Don't ever say that again, the rogue whispered. Something might explode. Aenir and Stefan laughed, and Mick threw both of them a scoundrel's grin as he sat across the table. Feeds established, Turlon reported from the comm station. We have a direct link to the cruiser. Good, Mick grinned. Let's get this thing started, shall we? Let's, Stefan agreed. Okay, folks, Mick began. Before we start planning this war, I'd just like to say one thing. That being, we shall not allow any non-force-sensitive beings to get involved. This is a force war, and the blood of the innocent need not be spilled. If someone tries to get the New Republic involved, I, for one, will not fight. Is this something that we can all agree on? A council member stepped forward, and his image became more apparent through the transmission. We'd not have it any other way, he said with a smile, and for a moment Mick's heart soared. Great, the rogue replied. Now, we've got a month. Let's get organized. It went smoothly, all things considered, and the only surprise had been a welcome one. Zan and Callista had returned from the deepest regions of space, their own quest on hold for the time being. Zan brought along his personal ship and his Padawan. Callista brought her Padawan and their healing expertise, which Mick feared would be sorely needed in the coming weeks. Callista and Zan strode into the room as a small council of war discussed hierarchy and structure. Callie glanced at Stefan, and a wordless exchange passed between them. They need more healers, and anyone and everyone they could find. With some arguing, Stefan volunteered for a search and rescue mission at the Jedi Temple. Callista soon found her home aboard New Hope in the medical wing. Zan threw himself into helping service and maintain the small Jedi fleet, and Mick made him the official intelligence officer. Things were moving slowly, but they were at least moving. Mercure. A good week had passed since Ari had landed on the forest planet of Mercure together with Ysalamiri, should they be needed in the coming war. The planet had been surprisingly quiet, with animals and wildlife moving along about the brush and trees, mostly ignoring her presence. Without the force to aid her, Ari found that she could not heal the scratches she endured when climbing the trees the Ysalamiri made their nests in. The lizards, although lazy and lethargic, proved harder to gather due to the tree heights in which they nested. For the love of... Ari swore as she descended a tree with 2 lizards on her back. She brushed herself off and adjusted the pack strapped across her shoulders. She noticed that the forest had suddenly become quiet and the birds were no longer chirping. Something is watching me, she thought, her hand falling instinctively to her blaster. She scanned the forest floor, squinting to see in the shadows between the bushes, but without the force she found it more challenging to notice the slight movements of local wildlife. Then she saw it. 2 Vornskars hiding in the bushes, their long tails silently whipping through the air. I've got you now, Ari thought as she silently unholstered her blaster and leveled it at the 2 crouching predators about 100 feet in front of her. She stood in the tall grass, which was actually taller than her light tunic and robes flowing in the wind. Oh, sorry, it's switching perspective. I forgot to do a transition there. She stood in the tall grass, which was taller than she was, her light tunic and robes flowing in the wind. Brink was nearby, but she had lost sight of him in the tall grass. She could hear the heavy paws and the deep growls of the Thoris Sounders slowly surrounding her and Brink somewhere in the field. "Brink! Over here! Quick! They're hunting us!" Ari called out, and suddenly a hand grabbed hers. It was Brink. They took off running through the tall grass back towards Luke's art house. A Thoris Sounder cut them off and prepared to lunge when Ari caught the snap hiss of a blue lightsaber, slicing the wolfhound in half. She looked up to see her father, a dead, serious look on his face as he frowned at her. "Haven't I told you that playing in the forest of Linwo isn't safe? There are Sounders out here, and they can easily take you down and make a meal out of you. Now get back to the house." Trelon Luxart commanded, his deep brown beard hiding his displeasure. Ari nodded to her father, and she and Brink ran back towards the house, her father following close behind. She shook the fleeting memory from her mind as she noticed the third Vornskar out of the corner of her eye. It suddenly lunged at her from the left, its claws digging into her shoulder. The weight of the animal's attack pushed her over, and she fell to the ground, the creature on top of her as she tried to force its weight off. It dug its claws in more sharply, the stinging barb on its tail flicking across her legs and once across her cheek, leaving a burning welt on her left cheek. She tried to roll the beast off of her, but it was too heavy, and she didn't have the force to aid her. She fought to keep its snarling teeth away from her face, enduring grazing teeth marks across her forearm as she brought her blaster around to bear on the animal's head. The attack suddenly stopped, and the animal rolled off of her with ease. She quickly rose to a crouch and scanned the forest floor for the other predators, but they were gone. As she got to her feet, a sharp pain hit her as she inhaled. She laid a hand across her stomach and found warm blood oozing from the claw wounds. Great! No way to heal myself, and I have to rely on a damn medkit to patch myself, she thought as she walked back to her transport. Sorry. Ithor. Mick Rundin rubbed his eyes and leaned back in the pilot's chair aboard the Firebird. He'd been staring at the numbers for hours, trying to will them to grow larger on his side of the battle, but it wasn't working. They didn't even have 1/10 of the armada the Sith had conjured, and the Jedi were not wealthy. The stores on the Firebird had been drained within a week. Mick smiled at the memory of his friends' faces when he popped open a few of the hidden compartments aboard the ship. He had to remind them all that in another life he'd been a smuggler, and a fairly good one at that. Thank you! I'll see you if you get back before I'm done. I hope you have a good evening. Thank you for the lurk, critter. They could purchase a rundown Lancer-class frigate, another squadron of XJ-3s, and 2 Corellian corvettes with the credits he'd stashed aboard his ship. Their combined fleet now consisted of 1 Moncal cruiser, designated New Hope. It would serve as the command ship unless or until they found something better. 1 Lancer-class frigate called Resilience, 2 Corellian corvettes, Nova Burst and Sunflare, 2 squadrons of XJ-3s, the Firebird, the Valiant, White Squall, and Blue Talon. They were hurting for ships, to say the least. There was a personnel shortage as well. They had just enough Jedi to run full crews on all the capital ships. The 2 squadrons of XJ-3s had their pilots, and the freighters could run with full crews as well. The thing was, after all that, they only had enough Jedi for 1 more fighter squadron. How soundly they were outnumbered hadn't truly sunk in until Mick had reviewed the numbers 3 times. Giving them an even fighting chance would take something more than a miracle. The rogue lit up a cigarette and stood, stretching. He could do nothing with the numbers, and staring at the console would only make him go blind. Sighing, he headed aft to the boarding ramp. The Firebird was tucked neatly inside the Moncal's hangar bay for the time being, to facilitate council meetings. It had gotten out that Mick was a decent mechanic, which meant he got tasked with organizing the repair work needed on the old warship. It was hard work, but the sense of urgency sped it along. New Hope was running strong, all her turbo lasers ready for battle, and her shields were holding steady. Most of the ship was asleep as Mick strolled down the curved hallways of the cruiser. He was heading for the officer's lounge if memory served correctly. On a Moncal cruiser, it was the only area of the ship with a view of space that wasn't a battle station. He found it with little trouble and entered the darkened chamber. The bar rode the wall nearest the entrance, and couches with low tables were arranged nearby. Towards the back of the room was an open space often used for dances. Behind this space was a huge transparent steel viewport that took up most of the wall. Ithor hung like a picture in the frame of the viewport with a large black ball against a black backdrop and surrounded by stars. Mick tossed the tobacco in a nearby ash receptacle and crossed the room to stand in the center of the open floor. He could still feel the life on Ithor and its battle to spread. The Mother Jungle would return, he knew. He just wished he could help her on her path to recovery somehow. He felt that the grove on Ithor was like the Jedi in their current situation, a tiny patch of green in a veritable ocean of cinder. The Mother Jungle and the Jedi were vastly outnumbered. The Jedi, like Ithor, could use a great deal of help. He was about to turn and leave when something outside the viewport caught his eye. There was the slightest flicker of pseudo-motion, and a small fleet of battleships dropped into the space around Ithor. Fearing the worst, Mick bolted to the command deck, using the Force to enhance his speed. He was a black and white blur as he raced down the curved corridors of the cruiser. He burst onto the bridge in time to catch the tail end of what he thought was a hailing call. We would like to speak with him as soon as possible. 2 of the counselors were at the ship's helm, and they turned as Mick made his way forward. Well, here he is now, one said with a smile. Master Din, the fleet commander that just dropped out of hyperspace, would like a word. Mick used the Force to steady his breathing before stepping up to the comm screen. This is Mick Rondin, he said. To whom am I speaking? I am Meldroma Vale, came a distinguished female voice, clan matriarch of the Witches of Dathomir and commander of the fleet you see before you. We have felt your plight, Conduit, and we offer our aid. Any help is more than appreciated, matriarch, Mick replied, barely able to contain his giddiness. Might I ask where you obtained such an impressive fleet? Much has changed on Dathomir since you and your master last visited, Mick Rondin, Vale answered. Our people have grown to love space travel and being among the stars. This fleet is my clan's home, and only a few remain on Dathomir for the sake of tradition. You were there? Mick asked in disbelief. You remember me and my master, Erb Watem Raylis? The matriarch laughed lightly. I would have to be very old indeed to remember such a thing, Conduit. No, I was not there, but my grandmother was, and she always spoke very highly of the Jedi who came to our rescue all those years ago. We repay that debt now in your time of need. Our fleet is yours to command. I thank you, Matriarch Vale. Micron bowed. You honor me and the Jedi by joining us today. At your convenience, I would have you and your officers join us at tomorrow's Council of War to help decide how to best deploy your fleet. As you wish it, Conduit. The matriarch bowed in turn. We shall be ready for your council tomorrow. The transmission ended, and Micron released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You certainly have powerful friends, Master Jin. One of the two council members patted the rogue on the back. Perhaps we misjudged you before. You have honor, and that is something the Jedi and a rogue can both agree on. And it's not even my birthday. Mick sighed, and this time it was a sigh of relief. You know, I take back that whole arrogant windbag thing. You guys aren't half bad. Oh, it pleases us to no end that we have your friendship, the counselor smirked. And a sense of humor? Mick laughed. Where did that come from? Laughter echoed down the corridors as the night went on. Mick sank into the pillows on his bunk that night with a smile. He rolled over to put his arm around his wife, and his smile faded. He missed her. He'd had enough time to think things through, and while he knew that he had indeed been right about several things, he also knew that he could have handled it differently. He wasn't angry with her anymore, and he was ready to make up. And now that he had found himself alone in his quarters aboard the Firebird, he was worried about where she might be and what was taking so long. Alright. I'm getting situated here. Sorry, guys. Alright. Okay. Who we got? Shadow, Sigma. Okay. I think I will wait a little bit. I do have a surprise for you guys that are here on a regular basis, but I am going to wait a little bit, probably closer to the end of stream, to see if a few more people show up. Alright, so that's the end of chapter 8. I'm gonna take a minute and get a drink of water. Alright. Give me just a minute while I check something. Okay. Alright. So my intent this evening was to read 3 chapters. So I do plan to go a little bit longer than normal. But again, that will depend on how I'm feeling, because I am still recovering. So just bear with me while I get a little bit of a snack. I have already done my eye drops, so you guys don't have to yell at me about that. Already did that before stream. And you can't yell at me about not having a snack because I totally have one. Alright. For anybody that might have snuck in that is relatively new to the channel, I'm going to take a minute. My name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer, which is what I'm doing tonight. I write and read my own Star Wars fanfiction. I also alternate streams with Star Wars The Old Republic content, which I've been playing since launch. So that's alternating Wednesdays between SWTOR and reading. And then every other Sunday, I do writing workshop streams where I hang out with you guys and we talk about the chapters that I'm working on, usually chapters that I'll be reading soon. So we're actually reading through some of the stuff that I did edits on recently. So if you have any questions about the stories, how long I've been writing, anything like that, please feel free to ask in chat. I would be happy to answer those questions for you. I am trying to pay attention to the chat this evening, but it's a little bit difficult when I'm actually reading. But I am trying. So, just give me 1 second while I check here. Sorry. Okay. Alrighty. Give me 1 second while I mess with something. Okay, what is going on? Sorry, something is a bit weird. Okay. I have a double chapter somehow. Give me just a second while I take care of that. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. It finally updated. Sorry. Okay. Alright. Hey, Ajo! Thank you for the lurk. Welcome in. We're about to start chapter 9. I had to do a bit of editing because I ended up with a duplicate chapter somehow. It happens. Alright. Chapter 9. Coruscant, midnight local time. Now remember, Stefan told Turlon as he finished making sure he had everything he needed. Only use the comm in a state of emergency. I know no one is expecting us, but with the heightened state of alert, I'm sure they're going to be keeping a lookout for stray transmissions. And why don't I just go with you? Turlon asked as Einar came into the compartment checking all his items as well. Both of them had opted to leave their robes on the ship since it would attract unwanted attention. Because you haven't had any training on infiltration like this, Einar told him, holding up a hand to stop Turlon's argument. Yes, I know your father was Special Forces, but you still haven't undergone the tests that you need for this kind of mission. It shouldn't take too long for us to activate the beacon once we're in the temple, Stefan told him as he opened the hatch. But in any case, there's no telling what trouble is waiting for us. If you don't hear from us in 2 hours, be ready for immediate departure back to Ithor. If we're not back in 4, get out of here. But, Master Card, Turlon started to say. I mean it, Turlon, Stefan told him. May the Force be with you. He looked over at Einar, who nodded and proceeded out of the ship, and Stefan followed behind him before closing the hatch. Northeast, Stefan said as they started in a jog towards the temple. Slowly, the two entered the doors of the Jedi Temple. There was no telling what had been left behind, so Stefan and Einar were cautious to use the stairs and not the turbolifts. I know I've been out of it for a year, Einar said as they hugged the wall as they went up. So, kind of run me through this again? After everything that happened during the invasion, Master Skywalker made good sense in thinking that ties with the other disciplines of the Force should be strengthened. The Falanasi and the Jensari? Einar asked as they kept an eye out for anything suspicious. Stefan nodded as he checked the door. What we're hoping to get to is a signal that contacts not only them, but others that are separate from the Order. Rogues like Mick, Stefan said as they walked down the corridor. We both have to enter an access code, give them the meeting coordinates for Ithor, and activate it. Once it's started, there's no way to jam the signal or shut it down. So it's just a case of activating it, Einar said as they reached the computer core. Sounds pretty straightforward too. They walked into the room, but the terminals had been smashed all over this room. Now what? He asked as Stefan looked around in bewilderment. See if there's a terminal still in good condition. Stefan, here's one, Einar called over to him as he activated a terminal with a cracked monitor. Stefan jogged over to his side when the terminal suddenly caught fire and black smoke filled the air. Einar jumped out of the way, coughing. Nope, guess I was wrong, he said, before he grinned at Stefan. Stefan shook his head and just laughed. This is not going very well. Alright, we've checked every blasted terminal in the room and nothing. It's all ruined, Stefan said, pausing to rub at his temples. No, not exactly, Einar said, suddenly remembering something. He stood up and... I'm gonna stop there because we're in an ad. Sorry, we are in an ad. Hey Sigma, yes, it's going okay for the moment. I'm just getting caught by the ads and not stopping in time. But yes, going pretty well. We're into the second chapter. I'm just waiting for the ad to be done. And for those of you who have Turbo or otherwise subscribed to the channel, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't ask for subscriptions, but if you like the content and you would like to subscribe, I do appreciate it very much. So, thank you. And thank you for being here. I'm just gonna wait for this ad to finish so that we can continue before we were rudely interrupted. So. And we'll be back from our ad in 3 seconds. Well, no, I can't read. 4 seconds. Wow. And we're back. Alright. No, not exactly, Einar said, as he suddenly remembered something. He stood up and ran towards the far wall. Stefan started moving in that direction. What have you got? Einar sat down on a nearby chair, sifting through the rubble until he stopped and pulled out a spherical object. This is the main terminal link, he said, handing the object to Stefan. So this is what links the terminal to the central core? Stefan asked, as he examined it. Aye, via a wireless transceiver, encrypted with top-level access meant for accessing data only meant for council. Yeah, and basic if you don't mind, but I get it. It's the connection to the core, Stefan told him with a grin. Exactly, and I'm pretty sure that we can find a desktop terminal in one of the offices downstairs. That we can get it to work from there. He stood and gathered a few tools from a nearby drawer. Pretty sure? Stefan asked, raising an eyebrow. Pretty sure. My quarters, Stefan said as they started back towards the stairwell. The computer there should still be in working order. It hasn't been that long since it's been in use. I'm right behind you, Einar said as he grabbed his comm. Turlon, we're checking Stefan's quarters for a terminal. Begin preparations. Acknowledged. 3 flights up, Stefan said as they went up the staircase. Is this seeming a little too easy to you? A bit, Einar said as they reached the level that Stefan's quarters were on. Stefan quietly opened the door and led the way to his study and activated the terminal within. He watched for trouble from the doorway as Einar began to access the files. Okay, we're ready, he said as Stefan came over from the door. After you. Computer, Stefan said as he started the file. Access and execute program Beacon 1. Set rendezvous coordinates for Ithor. Access code 1 flashed on the screen and Stefan looked at Einar. Access code 1, 1, 1, Alpha, 2, Beta, Einar recited and looked at the screen as he saw the request for the second code flash across the monitor. Access code 2, Stefan said as he went over the second grouping. 2, Alpha, Tango, 3, 7, 1. Here we go, Einar said, right as the computer asked for the final code. Final code? Saren, 9, 5, 2, Zeta, Stefan said as he closed his eyes. Execute. Beacon 1, activated. Transmission commencing. Come on, Stefan muttered as his eyes were fixed on the screen. Come on. Transmission accepted. Transmitting coordinates. They're getting it, Einar said with hope in his voice. Coordinates received. Transmission complete. Here we go, Stefan said as they both got up, but not before Einar caught another line across the screen. Stefan. Warning, transmission detected. Warning, transmission detected. Whoever they are, they're on to us, Stefan said as they left the room quickly. Turlon, warm them up, we're coming in, but there may be some trouble. Ooh, Lotro, I have not actually played that, but that sounds fun. I hope you enjoy. I'm going to turn the music up just a smidge so you guys can actually hear it. It's being super quiet. Ithor. The Council of War with the Witches of Dathomir went well. The attack pattern of their fleet was straightforward, and if history served any indication, very effective in a fight. Their strongest ships would fly point in a V formation with New Hope nestled between the wings as the command ship. Micron had been asked to take command of the old Moncal cruiser, but he had declined. He could still command the fleet, but he'd rather do it from the Firebird, where he could also inflict the most damage on the enemy armada. On the off chance that he died, the next in the chain of command would take his place, and so on. Currently, that chain put Matriarch Vale in the position to assume command if Micron should fall. With those matters settled, the fleet began practicing battle maneuvers, and Micron made sure the pilots got plenty of sim time. The Jedi techs had come up with an excellent sim of the Sith starfighter from the holo footage Mick and Ari had taken during their encounter, and Talon Card had come through with the information Mick had requested. They had a fully functional Sith starfighter aboard New Hope, and the techs already knew every component. Seeing as Mick had spent the last credit he had on outfitting the fleet, Talon waived the information fee on the condition that if the ship were still intact after all was said and done, he could have the Sith starfighter. Mick had happily agreed. Looking at the numbers, he knew they were still going to be soundly beaten. But it would almost be a fight now, as opposed to an all-out slaughter. They were going to need something more, and Micron could only hope that Stefan and Einar were having success in their mission to find help. Master, a soldier called from the comm station aboard the Executor, I have discovered that the Jedi are broadcasting a transmission from their temple on Coruscant. What is this transmission? It appears to be a beacon, my lord, the soldier replied. They are calling for help. The triangulation indicates they are calling the Falanasi, the Gensari, and various others that we cannot account for. Rogues. Aye, my lord. Orders? None, soldier, the master replied. Let them gather all the help they can. This is to be a war. Let us show them our honor by allowing them a fighting chance. Contact our men on Coruscant and order them to stand down and return to the fleet. Relay that order to all of our soldiers. As you will it, my lord. Most of the organization of the fleet was complete. The Jedi fleet was working well as a unit, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Mick found that he had little more to do, which gave him some time to think. Ari had been gone for some time now, when it was really starting to worry the rogue. Something wasn't right, and now that he could take a break from managing this ragtag fleet of Jedi, he was going to find out why. He got in contact with Liv to Traffic Control and had them send him her exit vector. From what he could tell, she'd headed to Mercure, which had him puzzled for a bit. Why she'd visit that abandoned planet was beyond him. She hated that world. Her stepbrother, Grand Admiral Thrawn, had been there for a time, and she despised anything that reminded her of him, like Yosemite. Damn that woman, Mick cursed as he realized what she'd done, going to harvest a forest's worth of furry lizards all on her own. He called the hangar and had them prep the Firebird. He left Vale in charge of keeping the pilots and the Sims and the fleet on their toes, and he blasted out of New Hope like a Minoc with his tail on fire. Mercure. Mercure hung in the blanket of space like 1,000 other worlds, a bluish-green orb amidst the pinpricks of light. He downloaded the location of Card's old base to the navicomputer of the Firebird so he'd have some sort of bearing for searching. Knowing Ari, he'd set up a search grid on the far side of the planet from the old smuggler's den, and, after piloting down through the atmosphere, set the computer to work, flying a low grid over the area. It was trying work, and he couldn't just reach out and sense her through the Force. The high metal content of the Force of Mercure made technological scanning difficult. After 3 hours of searching, however, the robust equipment aboard the Firebird managed to pick up a visual on a transport bearing New Republic markings. It was nestled in a clearing deep within the forest. There's my girl. Mick grinned as he took back control of the Firebird and set her down next to the transport. Ari had bandaged her wounds as best she could with a medkit from the ship, but she knew that without the Force to aid her, she would need to get off-world before long, as she was unable to heal herself with the Yosemite inhibiting the Force. She set the medkit down and turned to set the lizard she'd been carrying on her back when the Vornskars had attacked her, only to find the muzzle of a blaster shoved in her face. She looked up to see what appeared to be 3 fringe-rat, trashy smugglers and a Sith adept cloaked in black standing in front of her. The lead smuggler had the blaster pointed at her face. "If you would ever so kindly hand over your weapon, General Din," the Sith adept hissed with venom as he stared at Ari with his glowing eyes. "Fine. What's the occasion? Couldn't get me alone in my home on Livda, or was that too far out of your way?" she replied sarcastically, vaguely placing the face of the Sith as the one she'd seen in her nightmares only a week and a half before. She threw her blaster and her lightsaber to the smuggler's feet. One of them picked up her blaster and leveled it at her. The other handed the hilt of her lightsaber to the Sith. "On your feet," the lead smuggler said, one of his cronies jerking Ari to her feet by the elbow. "Easy now, I'm a lady," she returned, scowling at the smuggler. "You are the New Republic's highest-ranking officer and the Phoenix, wife of the Conduit, and were once known as the Wrath," the Sith answered in a cold voice. "I may be a general, but I'm no Jedi," Ari said, spitting her words at the Sith as the smuggler began to lead her through the transport towards the boarding ramp. "But you once were and are still considered a Koshakian guardian, and that makes you a threat to our race. We cannot allow you to reunite with the Conduit," the Sith said with an evil grin. "Okay, so that's your plan? Keep me stranded on a planet I hate, away from my husband, hoping I'll die of dehydration?" she replied sarcastically, rolling her eyes as the lead smuggler led her out of the transport, and one took out a pair of binders for her wrists. "Not dehydration. The Vornskers will smell your blood and come for you long before you die of thirst, Phoenix," the Sith said as he motioned for the second smuggler holding Ari to put her hands behind her back. She could feel one hand being locked into the binders, but before her other hand could be restrained. "I see." She began, ducking low, and headbutted the smuggler behind her, before landing a hard roundhouse to the third smuggler's chest. This sent him flying backwards. The first smuggler, who had the blaster, fired off several shots, but Ari quickly backflipped away, avoiding any fatal hits. One near shot grazed her right shoulder, but it wasn't a serious wound. She landed on her feet, her right hand quickly pulling her tiki blade from her left boot, and turning over her left shoulder, she threw the blade at the smuggler with the blaster, the blade landing neatly in his throat. He dropped the blaster as blood began to flow from the wound. He desperately clawed at his throat to remove the blade, but wasn't able to do so before he quickly fell to the ground. She pulled her secondary blaster and fired at the second and third smugglers, who were picking themselves up off the ground and searching for their own blasters. They were slow enough to unholster their weapons that Ari's shots hit them before they could look and see the weapon in her hand. She turned to face the Sith, but he was gone. She did a quick turn, but saw no trace of him or where he had disappeared to. She then strode over to the 3 dead smugglers that had obviously been hired by the Sith. She bent over the one with the blade in his throat and planted one boot on the dead man's chest before extracting the blade. She wiped it on her pants leg and resheathed it in her boot before walking over to the second smuggler. She took a moment to rifle through his vest and found her blaster. "I believe this is mine," she said to no one in particular, holstering the weapon. She found the key to the binders and removed them. The binders then fell atop the dead man, and she walked back to her ship. Without warning, she was pushed to the forest floor, a male Vornsker digging its claws into her right shoulder and its teeth into her left arm as she moved into a defensive position. She wrestled with the beast, desperately trying to get a boot up under the creature's belly to kick it off of her. She managed to get her boot where she wanted, but the creature suddenly moved, and she was forced to wrap her legs around the Vornsker's throat. With a quick move of her tightened thigh muscles and a sickening crack, the creature's neck broke, and she pushed the dead animal off of her, trying to catch her breath. "Damn this wretched planet and its creatures to hell," she shouted, sending a flock of local birds into the air from the nearby tree line. She brushed herself off and touched her shoulder and rib wounds tenderly, finding the claw marks deeper this time. She pulled a small suture kit from her pack, and with a sterilized needle and several winces of pain, she managed to put 5 stitches into her gaping side wound and 2 into her shoulder. She knew the stitches wouldn't hold for more than a day, but that would be long enough to finish gathering the Yosemite and then get off-world where she would have the Force to aid her healing. Now, enough disturbances for one day. Back to harvesting these furry bastards, Ari thought, before swinging the pack over her left shoulder to avoid putting weight on her right where the stitches were freshly sewn. She began walking back into the woods and found another conifer tree that the lizards tended to frequent. She stumbled over a tree root that had sneakily jumped out and grabbed her foot. The trek was bad enough, and combined with the amount of blood she'd lost, she'd found she was getting a bit dizzy. The transport wasn't far now, and after steadying herself on a nearby tree and dumping the 2 Yosemite she'd been carrying, she set off once more. A twig snapped somewhere off to her left, and she froze. Her deadly friends had returned. The smell of blood from her makeshift sutures had attracted them, and as she strained her hearing, she could make out the raspy cackle purrs of at least 4 Vornskers. She could almost see the clearing ahead, but she dared not move lest she give away her position. She tried desperately to steady her ragged breathing, but the exertion of the trek and the blood loss was starting to get to her. She silently swore, wishing the Force was there to aid her. There was nothing for it. If she stayed put, it would only be a matter of time before the beasts found her. Bolting would let them know exactly where she was, but if she could just make it up the ramp of the transport, she'd be safe. Come on, girl. Just like outrunning the Sounders back home. You did it before. You can do it again, Ari told herself. But the sickening realization that she had been a small child with a lightsaber on her belt and the Force to aid her speed reminded her that she was on her own now with no help. It would be life or death. A sharp twinge of pain from her left rib wound reminded her that the blood was still seeping through the stitches. Her mind made up. She took a calming breath and ran for it. Instantly, the low cackle purrs from before erupted into an all-out howl as the Vornskers picked up her trail. They were close. She could hear their feet on the ground as they chased her, but the clearing was in plain sight now. If she could just hold on for a few more minutes. Suddenly, one of the beasts leaped out of the tree line in front of her and blocked her path. She began to crouch, trying to flip over the animal, but stopped. She was surrounded. 5 of the creatures now circled her, pawing the ground, their tails whipping through the air. Slowly, she drew her blaster, trying to make as little noise as possible. But her hands were shaking with fatigue and the beginning signs of shock, and there was a distinctive clink as the barrel bumped against the buckle on her holster. One of the Vornskers charged, and she raised her blaster as quickly as she could, but she knew it was going to be close. Her eyes closed in anticipation of the pain she knew she was going to endure. They opened just as fast when she heard the whine of a heavy blaster being fired. A familiar one. The beast that had leaped at her hit the ground hard and rolled about a meter, very dead. At once, the remaining 4 beasts turned to where the shot had come from. Silhouetted against the light of the setting sun was a man, and from Ari's point of view, it looked like he was coaxing the animals to follow him. The Vornskers were quick to oblige and charged them in where he stood. 2 shots took down the first 2 beasts, and then the other 2 were on him. He ducked the leap of the first, and there was the distinctive snap hiss of the lightsaber being ignited. The world felt like it was spinning as Ari tried to focus on the man before her, watching as the 4 beasts charged head-on with viciousness and venomous tails flying. She began to stumble forward towards the transport, her blaster still in her grip. Head swimming, she vaguely recognized the color of the newcomer's blade as one of the beasts lunged toward him. A silver blade ripped through the flesh of the beast, and it landed in a crumpled heap behind him. The last one went to slash at the strange newcomer, and lost a paw to the silver blade. With a howl, the last Vornster took off with its tail between its legs. Ari managed to stumble a few more steps towards the transport before the world spun into dark oblivion, and she felt herself hit the hard ground. He'd patched her up as best he could with the supplies he'd found on the transport. She lay on one of the bunks in the small crew quarters, for all intents and purposes, asleep. Her breathing was normal, and the wounds had all begun to clot. She'd be fine after a day or 2 of rest or a Jedi healing trance. He knew once he got her back into open space away from the Yosemite, the force would return to her and she would heal herself in no time. She was just exhausted. She had been unconscious for over 3 hours, and Micron was worried that she might have suffered a concussion from the fall. Good night, Sigma. I hope you rest well. Oh, did I type that wrong? There we go. That's for you, Sigma. Alright. Frosty Tools is supposed to be posting as me. I will have to fix that. It's also not a first time chatter. Seriously. I'm having all kinds of technical issues today. Anyway. She was just exhausted. She had been unconscious for over 3 hours now, and Micron was worried that she might have suffered a concussion from the fall. He'd wet her lips with cool water and removed her ripped clothing to better clean and dress her wounds, as well as inspect for any signs of infection. He found none, save the wound on her right shoulder. It was deep and beginning to show redness and swelling, signs of a bacterial infection setting into the deep claw marks. He found a syringe with a strong dose of Republic antibiotic and injected her left hip with the needle. The medicine would ward off any further infection and help fight the one she was sustaining. He placed a cool towel on her forehead and stroked her hair. Her eyes began to flutter, and he smiled down at her. "Always getting yourself into trouble, huh?" he whispered. "Follows me like a plague," she replied with a small grin. The realization that her husband was there soothed her worried mind. She could feel the wounds and the tightly dressed bandages on her arm, shoulder, and ribs as she breathed, but the feeling of her husband sitting beside her on the bunk made the pain small in comparison. She smiled, her eyes half open with exhaustion. "Hello, my rogue," she breathed before laying her hand in his. "Hi, Princess." A day later, in orbit above Mercure. "I'm just saying I'm sorry, love. I didn't mean for us to split up over it. I just want you to take time off from work. You are pregnant, after all," Micron said. Ari was sitting up in the bunk and retaping her bandages as she listened. "You know me, love. I just can't do that. When I contact Maxwell and the fleets to arrive at Ithor," she began. "No military, no civilians, just Jedi," Mick cut her off. Ari looked up from her place on the bunk. "We are greatly outnumbered and they've already flanked us. It would be a losing war. That may be, but it's our fight. No non-Jedi. I won't have their blood on my hands," Micron argued. Ari sighed in defeat. There was no way around it, and she still didn't quite have the energy to argue the point. Aside from that, she was done arguing. Being apart had only reminded her how much she loved the rogue and how much his stubbornness was just another part of him that she loved. He gently laid a hand on her left shoulder, being sure not to touch the stitches. She had been slowly but aggressively healing them with Koshakian techniques, but she didn't wish to be put into a healing trance. Ari took his hand from her shoulder and laid it on her abdomen. She smiled when a look of surprise crossed his face. He could feel through the force the tiny heartbeat of the child growing within. It was too soon for the child to begin kicking, but the midichlorians were there and growing strong. "It's going to be a girl," she whispered. "My little princess," Mick said softly, laying a hand on his wife's cheek. Coruscant, the Jedi Temple. Stefan and Einar boarded the ship quickly. "How did it go?" Turlin asked as the two came aboard. He had already lifted them from the temple landing pad. It's sent, Stefan said as they leaned back into the chairs. Let's get back to Ithor and wait. Ithor. We're there, Han, Mick called from the cockpit. Come see what I did while you were off collecting lizards. They had left a good portion of the furry little beasts on Mercure, cramming 4 in the aft cargo hold of the ship. The lizards really didn't bother Micron much. They just negated the force, and he'd lived without it for the first 15 years of his life. He knew what it was like to be normal, and he could survive just fine. He also knew how the Jedi and other Force users felt about them. To those who grew up in the Force, being near one was like going blind and deaf all at once. She came into the cockpit laughing. Come see what you did? She asked between laughs. Then she looked at the forward viewport. By the stars, where did you find all of those? 57 capital ships hovered in space around Ithor, 3 of which Micron owned. They sat in a perfect cone formation with New Hope nestled inside, and Micron grinned. Vale must have been keeping them on their toes. Well, Mick replied, to be honest, 54 of them found me. I had enough cash aboard the Firebird to buy 2 corvettes and a Lancer-class frigate. Where did they come from? You mean the 54? Mick asked. They came from Dathomir. Apparently they're descendants of a clan of witches Master Herb and I rescued all those years ago. She studied the scene for a few moments more before shaking her head. It's still not enough. I know, Mick sighed, but it's something. We've got 2 more weeks to build up, and Stefan and Einar have gone on a mission to find more help. They'd better hurry it along. I know. Ari took the co-pilot's seat as Mick eased the ship through the formation and into New Hope's hangar bay. The 2 squads of XJ-3s had been moved to one of the forward gunships for quicker deployment, which made for plenty of landing space in the old Moncal cruiser's hangar. Welcome aboard the Moncal cruiser New Hope, Mick smiled as he shut down the engines. Command ship for this little ragtag fleet. This is my flagship? Ari asked as she peered out the viewport at the interior of the hangar. It had seen better days. Much better days. Actually, no, Mick replied as he got up from the pilot's chair. I guess, technically, this is my flagship, even though I'll be commanding from the Firebird. Excuse me? I know it's a bit unorthodox, but I wanted to be somewhere where I can do the most damage and still lead this little expedition, the rogue said as he headed down the boarding ramp. A couple of the Jedi mechanics nodded in his direction. He threw them both a sloppy salute. No, nerf herder, Ari said as she caught up and fell in step with him as he continued into the corridor. You said this was your flagship? Yeah. You're commanding this fleet? Is there something wrong? Mick asked as he opened the door to the quarters he'd been using on the cruiser. Don't you think there's someone a bit more qualified here? Ari asked as the door slid shut behind her. Look, babe, Mick replied as he lit up a cigarette. This isn't your navy. These aren't your people. Hell, we don't even have a system of rank we're going by. I got the job partly because the council thought it was a good idea, partly because I'd been the biggest contributor of ships by proxy to this fleet, and partly because I've been organizing this thing from day one. Switching leadership now wouldn't just be difficult, it would probably be detrimental to the war effort. But you don't know the first thing about leading a fleet, Ari protested. She looked around the room she and Mick were in. You don't even know where the command quarters are on this ship. Mick arched an eyebrow. I don't know a thing about leading, he asked. I was a commander, babe. I led my squadron through 50 missions with only 5 casualties. Name one person, besides Wedge, who could do that well. And I know these aren't command quarters. I'm stopping right there because we're taking a break. I don't know why Frosty Tools is suddenly posting as itself. Anyway, we're taking an ad break. Sorry, guys. Frosty Tools. Alright, give me one sec. Frosty Tools, Frosty Tools. Having all kinds of issues. while that ad is going, I'm going to try and fix this, because that should not be posting as itself, but let's see. Looks like we're back from the ad. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks for sticking it out. Give me a second while I try to fix this. If you're still here, I'll give you a shout out, Sigma. Okay. Okay. Alright. I will deal with that later. Yeah, I'm having all kinds of technical issues this evening. Here we go. Name one person besides Wedge who could do that well. And I know these aren't the command quarters. I had some men clear that oversized compartment out and refit it as a mass briefing room. You're leading me on. I'm sorry, Princess, Mick sighed. I'm not. Tell me I'm your second in command, at least. Actually, Mick hesitated. The clan matriarch of the Deathmore Witches, Meldroma Vale, already has that position, and by the looks of things, she's done a great job so far. So what would you have me do? Ari asked, exasperated. First, calm down, Mick replied. I don't know what I want you to do just yet, aside from that. Things don't work like they do in the Navy around here. Everyone chips in wherever they can. I may be in command of this fleet, but I'm also a mechanic, a janitor, a medic, a communications tech, a pilot, and sometimes even a cook. Okay, hotshot, Ari said as she folded her arms. How do you plan to effectively employ Project Alpha in this coming war? Well, first, I'm going to have to know what Project Alpha is, Mick replied. We can go over the full schematics and technical readouts in the Council of War tomorrow. I can tell you right now that if it's any kind of bioagent, we are not using it. Ari wasn't happy. That much he could see from how she held herself. Look, he soothed. It's been a long day for both of us. We're running on Ithorian time here, which means the council will be meeting in about 9 hours. I think we could both use a little sleep before then. Fine, Ari said as she kicked her boots off and unstrapped her gun belt. Oh, and after the council, you and I are going dirtside. What the hell for? You'll see, Mick replied. Don't worry. It's important. Oh, goody, Ari rolled her eyes. Coming out now, Trelawn announced as the rest entered the flight cabin. The fleet was still holding a good formation from Stefan's impression, which was a good sign. Any word of Mick? He asked. The Firebird landed with a ship in tow an hour or so ago, Trelawn told him as he pulled up the channel to New Hope. Ari's there with him now. Now, what in the Force had Master Ari been up to for so long? Einar started asking as they approached. Merkir, Stefan said as he stepped back a moment. Trelawn, stay clear of your grandmother's shuttle when you land. Ylsamiri? Einar asked with concern. A lot of them, Stefan answered as they landed inside New Hope's hangar bay and started opening the hatch. Better get used to it, Dylan yelled from the deck as the Vor started to make their way down from the ship. She's got some kind of purpose for them, but criff as she's telling the rest of us. Well, she always has a reason, Stefan said as he slung his pack over his shoulder. How's everyone else holding up? Spirits are pretty good, Dylan said as they walked down the deck. Bernice is doing some maintenance on White Squall. Andrew is staying with Mother and Catherine, and Edward's looking after all of them. Just as long as he doesn't overdo it, Stefan joked. Dylan laughed. I think Andrea said something about him keeping a squadron of Nighthawks on standby, but I don't know if she was joking or not. Einar couldn't help but wince and laugh at the same time. I think your son-in-law is going to be just like you, along with his father, Stefan. Actually, I was thinking he'd have kept a battle group in orbit, Stefan chuckled. Actually, Dylan said, as he looked over the group, since Master Din didn't want anyone but Force users in this fight, our home fleet doesn't know what else they can do, so they're staying in our systems. The second group is actually in orbit of Catan and the forest moon Catane. Sounds like he's pretty serious, Einar said as they exited the hangar. He's Catani, all right, Turlon joked, then started getting a look from Dylan. Hey, it's all in good fun. You said the same about me the other day about my parents. I did, Dylan said. Oh, by the way, Dad, council meeting is set for a few hours from now. Well, we slept on the flight in, Stefan said. I want to put my mobile suit through a diagnostic before things start happening. I went ahead and did it 3 hours ago, Dylan said as he stretched. I'm so used to Commodore time, Ithor time just hasn't suited me yet. But anyway, Mick's wanting to hold it in the new briefing room he set up. Alright, in a few hours' time. Yeah, I gotta work on some bot stuff. It's being weird. So that is the end of chapter 9? Yes, chapter 9. Okay. Alright. I'm good to keep going. My back's bothering me a little bit, but I think it'll be okay. It's, not more than I usually deal with at this point. The ice pack is helping. Alright. Oh, now I got different people in channel? Alright. Okay, I'm actually gonna pause right now. And, for those of you who are here, if you play SWTOR, please let me know in the chat. I am on Starforge, so you must be on Starforge, so, I know, most of you have characters on Starforge. If there's anybody in chat that does not, unfortunately, what I'm about to do will not help you. So your character must be on Starforge. Let me see if I can get this working here. So, let's see. Give me a second here. I've never done this before. So, let's see. Okay. So... Okay, let's see. Give me 1 second while Okay, I'm just looking at the names of people in chat. Okay. I'm leaving myself out of this. once again, your character must be on Starforge. Okay. I'm actually going to switch screens here real quick. Give me a second. I'm doing some technical things. Give me a sec. Give me a sec. Okay, that's not what I want. Okay. Let me know if you guys can see that. I'm not actually doing writing right now, but it's the only screen that I have that will actually show me the wheel, so. Alright, so I'm going to spin this. I have a selection of items that the winner can pick from on one of my tunes. Alright. And so I'm gonna go ahead and spin this. And then whoever the winner is can contact me and we will set up a time to kind of look through that. So I am doing this as a way to celebrate the fact that I have 150 followers and the fact that I have reached affiliate. I officially reached affiliate back in March, and honestly, I would not be able to have reached affiliate or have gotten the 150 followers without any of you being here and supporting this channel, so thank you very much. So I'm going to do, let's see, don't need sound. Okay. So I'm gonna spin it. I actually have several items, so I'm going to spin it 2 more times and see. I'm gonna actually find something to write on. Give me a second. I need something to write on. So Taba, congratulations. I have several items that in one of my legacy banks that you are free to pick from. We can get together later. Let me just find something to write on. Okay. Oh gosh. I need paper! Oh my word. So sorry, I can't find paper. Let's see. Okay. Alright, so Taba, are you actually here? Or are you just lurking? Okay, well, he's usually here, so let me... Okay, so... Alright, I'm going to... gonna spin again and see what we get. No. Come on. No. Remove. Okay. First time I'm doing this, so just bear with me. Ajo, are you here or are you lurking? Ajo, are you here? Alright. I know he's usually here. Let me do one more. Because I have several items. And zoo. Alright. Okay, so this is the first time that I'm doing anything like this. So, if each of you could message me on Discord when you get a chance and let me know what time to meet up with you. I will be around tomorrow. So just hit me up at some point tomorrow on Discord or throughout the rest of the week and we can get that sorted. I have 5 or 6 items that you guys can choose from. So please let me know when you're available and we can sort that out. And again, thank you to each and every one of you who is here. And I appreciate you for being here and supporting the channel. It's this channel literally would not exist without you. So okay. Putting that back on the correct screen that it should be on. And then I am switching back to here. Alright. So if Ajo and Toba and Zoo could each contact me at some point between now and this weekend, that would be awesome. And I will get you guys squared away. Again, thank you so much for your support of this channel and for me as a streamer. I really, really appreciate it. Just keep in mind that your character must be on Starforge in Star Wars: The Old Republic, or I can't give you your loot. Alright. Now, where was I? Okay. Chapter 10. I'm going to pause and get a drink of water. Alright. Okay. I am taking a moment to just... okay. Okay. Chapter 10. The War Council went well enough, and it was good to have Ari there, but things were still tense between the Rogue and the Phoenix. She was immensely unhappy about not having a command, and he was still harboring some resentment for the government she'd given her life to, and their son to. He saw glimpses of the woman he'd married, but the woman she'd been replaced with was still mostly in charge. Brink showed up a day or two after the council, and Mick was glad to have the smuggler along for the ride, but he knew how it would look to the others after he made a big speech about not involving non-Force users, so he made a show of being reluctant. They were still looking down the losing end of a fight, and Mick didn't like to lose. In the hangar of New Hope, there was a loud crash, followed by an equally loud zap, which was then followed by a stream of curses that would make a Hutt blush. Mick Rondin stumbled down the boarding ramp of the Firebird amidst a cloud of black smoke. The ventilation in the hangar kicked in, and the acrid cloud quickly cleared away. Fuming, Mick kicked a landing strut and quickly wished he hadn't as pain shot through his big toe. Cursing once more, he hobbled over to a stack of parts crates, sat down, and lit up a cigarette. "You know, those things can kill you," Stefan said as he crossed the hangar to where Mick sat scowling at the Firebird. Not if she doesn't first, Mick replied, nodding toward the ship. Troubles with the bird? She's old, Mick said, making the word a curse. I'm trying to squeeze more power into the shield so Ari will be more protected, but everything in her is already overhauled so much that I'm beginning to think I've reached her limit. Tried rerouting power from the engines? Stefan asked as he sat down. She's the fastest ship in the fleet as it is. Surely she could stand a minor downgrade in speed. I thought about it, Mick answered, shaking his head. Problem is that the engines run too high to siphon off just a little energy. I tried rerouting a bit, and the superconductor wire flash fried. I was wondering what caused that zapping noise, Stefan told him with a grin. Oh no, Mick sighed. The wiring just melted and burned some insulation, causing the black smoke. I couldn't see a thing. The zap you heard was me fumbling around and bumping into the reverse power coupling. Ouch, Stefan winced. At least I know it works, Mick said as he put out his cigarette and threw the butt into a trash bin. He began walking back up the ramp and Stefan followed. He found the Rogue in the aft engine room, his feet sticking out from the crawl space he was in. If you're going to keep talking, do me a favor and hand me that hydro spanner, Mick said as he pulled back a few wires. Sure, Stefan replied, handing Mick the tool. What are you doing now? I'm just going to put her back together, Mick replied, his voice muffled. I'll just make sure Brink keeps her a safe distance from the heat of things. Well, what are the shields running at now? Just over 200%. What? Stefan exclaimed. I know. I should be able to squeeze a few more out of her. Maybe I'm just losing my touch. Are you crazy? Stefan asked. Yes, but that's beside the point. No, I mean, how did you manage that? Stefan knelt next to the opening in the wall and peered inside. Mick was up to his eyeballs in wiring and grease. You put a blockade runner shield generator in this thing? Transplanted Corvette generator, actually, Mick answered as he spliced together a couple of wires. Damn near had to take it apart and rebuild it inside the Firebird to get the thing to fit. And you're worried that Ari won't be well enough protected? This thing has got to be the safest place in the fleet. Mick shrugged, or at least tried to in the cramped space he was in. My wife, my daughter, and my best friend are going to be in this hunk. She damned well better be. Give me a hand? Stefan grabbed hold of Mick's outstretched hand and pulled the Rogue out of the compartment. Speaking of that. I know. Mick cut him off as he bolted the wall panel back into place. But for Brink, I've made an exception. The man's a hot hand on a stick, and Ari's never really been able to fly the bird. In fact, no one has. But I trust Brink, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have taking care of my 3 girls. 3? Mick patted the wall of the engine room. First girl I've ever called my own. Oh. The Rogue picked up his toolkit and headed for the cockpit. Wait, that's not what I meant, Stefan said as he caught up with Mick. It's Ari. You two haven't really been getting along recently, and, well, I know it's none of my business, but I hate to see you two like this. You're both miserable. Let me ask you something, Mick said as he sat down in the pilot's chair and began flipping switches. Let's say that for some reason you and Blue Talon got separated from the main battle group. Now let's say you're led to force knows where before they hit your reactor core and everything goes nova. You're lost, stranded, and for argument's sake, mostly dead. What do you do? Well, I'd try to find a way back, Stefan replied, cautiously. You know where this is going, Mick said. I fought my way back from hell to get to her. Do you know how much it hurts when a ship explodes with you in it? I should have just let myself die, but I couldn't leave her. So I fought my way back and finally made it, only to find that the woman I married didn't exist. I should have called it quits then, but no. Like a fool, I clung to the hope that I could bring her back. You saw it. It was killing me, but I worked every minute just trying to get her to remember. I channeled enough force energy to give her back the body she had when I met her. I probably shaved off 10 years of my life that night, but damned if I cared. I gave us both a brand new start. Look at me. Look at her. We're in our 20s again. But did it help? Yeah, for a little while. She had her fire back. For a moment, she remembered who she was, but only for a moment. It's like she's not even there. It's like my wife is dead and someone is playing a really nasty joke on me, and the punchline is that I can do everything in my power and more, and it still won't matter. For the first time, Stefan noticed the dark around Mick's eyes and the fact that it wasn't grease. I haven't slept in a little over 3 days now, Mick said, his voice barely above a whisper. I asked her if she wanted to have a night on the town when I first got back. You know what her answer was? She said she thought she might have a dress she could wear. The only dress I ever remember her wearing was her wedding dress. The old Ari would have slid into those blaze pants of hers, hiked up some boots, strapped a blaster on her hip, and flown with me down to the heart of the red light district. It used to be us against the galaxy. Now, all she could think about is her criffing job. Whose half-witted nerf-brained idea was it to put her in charge of the Republic's joint military forces anyway? I don't know, Stefan quietly replied, but she's well suited for the position. No one else has her experience. Criffit, Mick spat. I liked her better when she didn't outrank me. You were gone for almost 50 years, Mick, Stefan said. That's a long time, and well, people change. Criffit, I know that. Mick slammed his fist into the side of the console. Flesh ripped and blood marked the spot where his fist had connected. Blood, and Stefan was surprised to see a dent in the console as well. The rogue stood up and flexed his bloodied hand a bit. I'm sorry, Stefan, he sighed and shook his head. In a moment, he was back to his normal self, and Stefan came to realize something. All the smart-ass remarks, the cockiness, the bravado, all of it was for show. It was a screen Micron could put up so others wouldn't know what was going on backstage. It was a barrier he'd created to keep people from seeing what went on inside his head. He threw Stefan a trademark grin. I'm heading for the officers' lounge. Brink owes me a drink. After that, Ari and I are going dirt side. She missed the mass ceremony we had in the Grove. I'm going to hold a private one for her before the witches have theirs. Any luck with finding more help, by the way? The beacon has been lit, Stefan replied as he followed Mick back out into the hangar. With any luck, new arrivals will be joining us tomorrow. Good. Mick smiled. We'll hold a meeting at 2000 hours. Vale's been doing a good job of keeping the fleet on their toes, but I want to get some practice melees in before we set out. The meeting will get any newcomers their assignments, and then the command staff can go over some practice scenarios for the fleet. Aye, Commander. Stefan threw a lazy salute, which Mick returned as he began to stride off. And, Mick, Stefan called after the departing rogue. Mick turned. If you need anything. I know. Mick smiled. Thanks, Stefan. And he disappeared around the corner. Any time, Stefan said to no one in particular. With a bit more on his mind than when he entered the hangar, Stefan left and headed back towards the hangar that held White Squall. Dad, what is it? Stefan said as he sat up from his bunk on board White Squall. There was enough room for everyone on board New Hope, but Stefan, Dylan, and Arrhenius had opted to stay quartered on the ship, so any extra room on the flagship could be used to hold extra supplies or be converted for medical use, because there were sure to be a lot of wounded in this fight. We got a signal from a new group that just arrived, Dylan said as he came into the berth. The Jansari are asking to speak with you. They came in much faster than I ever thought, Stefan said, as he got up and grabbed his cloak. How far out are they? They've got 20 ships coming into the formation right now, and a shuttle is bringing the Sari car over to see you. Not much time, Stefan said as he made sure he was presentable. It wouldn't do to greet the leader of another discipline looking like you'd just woken up, which he just had. How long have they been talking? Einar asked as he walked up to Dylan. They've been at it for over an hour, Dylan said, moments before the door started to open and Stefan walked back out from the hangar. And I'm going to stop there because we're in an ad. So we'll just wait. So. Yeah, we're in an ad, so I'm just gonna hang out for a minute. Okay. And yes, I am having a snack. I promise you, I'm not starving myself. All right, and we're back from our ad. All right. So we're I don't know, a third of the way into chapter 10. Let's see. The sounds of the Gentari's shuttle was already getting quieter from it leaving the hangar. What is it? They know the situation and understand the Sith can be just as much a threat to them as they are to us, Stefan said as he leaned against the bulkhead. They'd be honored to join up with us. That's good news. Anar said as Mick came up to the group. They're joining up. Great, Mick said with enthusiasm as he hung out with them for a moment. Any news from the Falanasi? The Sarikara said that they've been able to keep in better touch with the Falanasi than we have. He sighed. They've been keeping to their pacifist path stronger than I ever expected, but she did say that the Falanasi were sending a ship to talk with us. Don't expect the worst just yet, Anar said to Stefan and Mick both. They may not know the entire situation. New Hope. Forward fighter bay. Try it now, Rhaenys said from inside the cargo bay of the X-Wing. Nothing, the other Jedi sitting in the cockpit said after trying to activate a system or two. The screens are still blank. A few moments after that, some sparks could be heard under the fighter, followed by a few choice words. Spast it, Rhaenys yelled as he jumped out of the compartment in a hurry. Of all the... Sounds like me when I used to manage one of these things, Brink said as he walked over. What's the trouble? The main screens for navigation and targeting went down after the last training flight, Rhaenys said as he climbed back into the cargo area. I've been trying to make sure that the system was getting enough power, and now I found out that the circuitry was exposed to something. Blast, what I'd give to have Viper here right now. Viper? My sister's astromech, Rhaenys said as he came back with the circuit board. But he and her XJ3 are in the hangar at home, and she wouldn't let me bring either of them. Well, older sisters can be like that, Brink said. Especially older sisters that are close to 4 months pregnant, Rhaenys continued, causing Brink to chuckle. What brought you down here anyway? I thought you and Master Din were going to make sure everything was alright with the Firebird. Well, here's where I become a father and start threatening you, Brink said as he laid a data pad down next to Rhaenys. Irina? Rhaenys asked as he looked over at Brink. I didn't know she sent a message. She put it together after she found out that the Jedi were incommunicado, he said as he fixed Rhaenys with a stern look. Just as long as you two have been... Captain Cadre, Rhaenys said before the thought was finished. No disrespect, but you know my father well enough to know he taught me right. Brink nodded as he tossed the pad over. I knew you'd say that. Besides, Rhaenys said as he grabbed the replacement circuit board and hopped into the X-Wing's compartment. Irina and I are still just friends. Our choice. Let me give you a hand, Brink said as he walked up the ladder and pointed to the other Jedi. Climb on out, rookie. Let an old hand with these things see what we can come up with while he's fixing the system. The brief with the Gensari went as well as could be expected. They wanted full command of their section of the fleet, basically doing whatever they felt whenever they felt like it, but still fighting on the side of the Jedi. What they got was third in command and free reign of the right wing of the formation. It took some doing, but after an hour's worth of talking and a few minor concessions, things were straightened out and the fleet was ready for some more formation drills by the end of the day. The Jansari had brought in 20 dreadnoughts, which brought the total to 87 capital ships, a third of the Sith fleet. They were closer, but still outgunned by a long shot, especially considering the 3 superstar destroyers in the Sith Armada equaled about 20 of the Jedi's capital ships in terms of firepower. How they'd managed to revive the Executor and the Lusankya was beyond Meg, and where they found a third SSD was even more mind-boggling. But guessing at those unanswerable questions would get the rogue nowhere, and he left those till after the war. There were 20 fighter squadrons in the fleet now, at 12 ships apiece, and he already arranged them in his datapad from strongest to weakest. They'd be pairing up the squadrons in battle, so Mick assigned each strong unit a weak one. They'd evened out nicely, and the pilots weren't grumbling too much about the 5 practice melees a day. The techs, on the other hand, well, they'd just have to get used to it. Chances were they'd be doing mid-battle repairs throughout the fight just to keep fighters in the fray anyway. It was a lot to think about, running a fleet, but he'd led his squadron right when he was a commander. It wasn't too big of a step to admiral, just more people and bigger toys. "Hey, Rimrat!" A familiar voice called up the ramp of the Firebird. "Permission to come aboard?" Mick smiled a bit as he bolted the last wall panel back into place. He put everything back together, deciding he'd gotten all he could and more out of the old girl. "Granted, Laserbrains," he called back. "I'll be in the lounge in a second." Brink had his boots kicked up on the hollow table with Mick, and when Mick walked in with a couple of glasses of Curly and whiskey, he set one in front of Brink and took a seat across the table. "Well, at least you still know how to treat a boarding party," the old smuggler smirked as he gulped down some of the ale. "Damn, Mick, where'd you get this stuff? Or should I ask when?" Mick took a sip of his own and let it sit on his tongue a bit before swallowing. The burning sensation warmed him from the inside out as it slid down his throat. 10 years before my last mission with the Blades," Mick answered. "And I picked it up in Coronet City, Treasure Ship Row, back when the place was still a smuggler's heaven." "What's the occasion?" Brink asked, looking at his glass in profound awe. Mick sighed sadly. "This is the last bottle I had on the bird," he said. "Not many Jedi keep stores of alcohol on them. Anyway, what brings you down to the hangar this fine, evening? Night? Morning?" "Afternoon, actually," Brink replied. "If you're running on Ithor time, and I'm here for a couple of reasons. I just finished helping one of Card's boys with a twitchy XJ on my way to find you." Mick lit up a cigarette. "Yeah? What were the reasons?" "Well, first, you've got to show me how to manage this beast of yours." Brink grinned. "I remember what it's like to fly here, but it was a long time ago, and I'm sure she's only gotten more finicky in her old age. When you go dirt side, and I know you will, I want to be able to put her through her paces." "All right," Mick smiled. "We can take her out to an asteroid field about half a light year outside the system, but that'll have to wait till tomorrow. Tonight, I'm taking Ari dirt side on Ithor. Which brings me to the other reason I'm here." Brink finished his glass and set it down on the table. "She thinks she's losing you, Mick. Says you've been angry with her a lot more recently, and that you're not really talking to her. What's going on, anyway? When you got back, we couldn't separate the two of you for half a minute. Now, well, it's like you don't even know each other." "You may be closer to the mark than you know, Brink." Mick sighed. "She's not losing me. You know as well as I do that I couldn't leave her. And I'm not angry with her either. I'm just frustrated. Sometimes I feel like she doesn't even know me anymore. And others I feel like she doesn't even know herself. I'm trying, buddy. I really am. But, well, I don't know." The rogue stood and paced the lounge. He took another drag of his cigarette before speaking. "It's like this. Arya and I were together for nearly 16 years when I took off on that last mission. It's a long time to be together and grow together, but it was cut short. We were still in our prime then, both of us. We both still had the fire, the strength, the passion of 2 kids in love. You were there. You know we never slowed down, and when I got shot down in a firefight, Arya and I never had the chance to settle down. And that's the last thing I remembered about us. It was always us against the galaxy. To go from that to what it is now, I don't know. It's like a shock to the system, and it hits every time we're together. Mick tossed the finished cigarette in the trash compactor, so I tried to fix the problem. I tried to give us a fresh start. We're in our mid-20s again, in every sense of the word. I thought that by bringing us back to our prime, she might remember what it was like when we started out. But I couldn't bring back her spirit. Her fire is gone, and if it's not, well, it's almost burned out. I miss her so much. She just doesn't seem to get me anymore. The thing of it is, I haven't changed a bit. You ever think about telling her all of this? Brinket asked. It's obvious you still love her, and I know she still loves you. Just talk to her, buddy. She's hurting pretty bad, but she's having a hard time showing it. Mick shrugged. You know, at times I think maybe it would be better if I just stayed dead. You better get off that flight path right now before I lay you out where you stand, Brink warned the rogue. I have never seen Arya as happy as she was when you came back, and if she lost you again, it would kill her. That's something I just plain won't allow. So before you start thinking that you'd be better off dead, think about this. She died the day they said you'd been lost. She died again when she lost Kevin. The hurt in that woman's eyes never left her. When you came back, I saw some of it go away. She was dead for the longest time, and I will not see her that way again. Take it easy, pirate, Mick said as he lit up another cigarette. I'm not going anywhere. I want to fix this. I've just got to figure out how. You could start by talking to her. I will. You'd better. I'm taking her to Ithor tonight, Mick said. And now, will you loosen up? I'm the one who's supposed to be all high-strung, remember? I'm just doing what friends do for friends, Brink replied as the two headed down the ramp and into the hangar. I know, and I appreciate it. Good, Brink smirked. Now, be sure to save what's left of that bottle. I'm calling half of it mine as my counseling fee. Mick laughed. Sure thing, pirate. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to find the Phoenix. She and I have a date on Ithor in half an hour. There was a light knock on the door to the quarters she and Mick were sharing aboard New Hope. Wondering who it could possibly be, she opened it to find Micron standing in the corridor. What did you knock for? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Mick produced a bouquet of flowers from behind his back and performed a gentlemanly bow. I was wondering if the lady would care to join me for an evening, he said with a smile. What's got into you? Ari asked, taking his outstretched hand. Have you been drinking? Only a little, Mick smirked. Come on, you and I need some time to be alone together. Ithor is about as secluded as you can get, and I know this great place right on the water. There's water down there? Real, clear water? You'll see, Princess, he replied as he led her to the hangar where the Firebird waited, prepped and ready to go. Callista woke slowly in the darkened corridor she shared with Zan. Turning over, she gazed at him as he slept still. Good morning, Sharika, she teased, smiling. He grinned as she began to rise from the bed. I need to gather all the healers to New Hope so that we can prepare, she said as she began slipping into her robes. Beskar just wasn't practical in a medbay. He stood slowly, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes as he rose to join her. And what are your plans besides that, love? He hugged her to him for a moment, his strong arms wrapped around her shoulders. I need to catch up with Master Din and discuss how the Jedi healers can be put to the best possible use. Force only knows how much they'll be needed, she thought at him. He nodded and set himself to the task of getting dressed. But there's always later. What did you have in mind? They had landed on Ithor in the Firebird, just the two of them. Micron wore his traditional smuggler's outfit, vest and all, blaster riding low around his waist. Ari, as always, was in some sort of military uniform. Her camouflage BDUs, which were composed of a sleeveless green tank top, camo pants, black combat boots, a jacket and garrison cap with her hair hidden under the cap. A blaster swung from her right hip, as well as a bowie knife from her left sheath, her tiki blade sheathed inside her inner boot. Micron led her to the quiet grove beside the cool, crystalline waters of the only remaining lake on Ithor. So this is the lake my grandson was going on about. Our grandson. And yes, Micron replied, noticing her expression didn't even change to his comment on Turlon. Stefan and Einar told me about your little ceremony here the other night. I'll have you know that I'm not going to pledge myself to the Force. I gave up on the Order and the Code long ago, she told him. And I'm not going to force you to do anything of the sort, Micron replied, taking her hand and leading her towards the lake. You know I don't follow the Jedi Code either. What makes you think I'd start now? Oh, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna go over here, actually. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Ori remained silent as she bent over and picked up a handful of the dead soil they were walking on. She let the soil fall from her fingers, the dry dust floating away in the breeze. I know you know what happened here, Micron said to his wife, watching her reaction. Her face turned from mild neglect to a flash of anger. In an instant, yeah, the Vong happened, she replied angrily, knowing the Vong were responsible for taking her husband from her so long ago. Micron thought he would press the issue and try a different approach. What would Thrawn have made of the Yuuzhan Vong? Ari's eyes moved quickly from the earth in her hand to her husband's face, her look of anger changing to surprise. As Wedge once put it, ground a Vong. If he had a few examples of their artwork, she replied, a half-smile forming on her face. She stepped away from her husband, picking up a few stones and began to skip them over the lake's smooth surface. You know, I tried so hard to live up to his military genius, Ari began. He was a maniacal, calculating murderer, Micron protested. But a military genius nonetheless. I wanted to be great like him, but in a way that would protect the New Republic, not destroy it as he had tried to. I wanted to prove that I wasn't corrupt like he was just because he was my stepbrother. She watched the stones move over the surface one by one. You are great, Ari, the best the New Republic has ever seen, but I think it's time for the Republic to stand on its own, to make its own mistakes without you mothering it, Mick replied quietly. She looked at him and then back at the water. Maybe you're right, and maybe you're wrong. Only time will tell. Had I been in command when you left that day on that damn secret mission, you never would have gone and been taken from me, and the Vong would never have... She began to say the Vong would not have caused so much destruction as they did, but she stopped. Princess, you weren't in charge then, and even if you were, you don't know what the outcome would have been, Mick answered, stopping beside her and taking her hand. She looked over at him. I know, but I still can't help think of what might have been, and I guess I just don't want to see anything like that happen ever again. She moved into his embrace. Perhaps after all this is over, we'll return, and I will heal the damage the Vong caused so many years ago, she whispered softly as Micron held her close. She could feel him nodding in agreement. Perhaps, he whispered back. Have I ever told you how hot you look in those BDUs? Micron said slyly, smiling at her as he slid her outer jacket off, letting it fall to the ground. He also removed her cap, letting her long hair fall around her shoulders as he tossed the cap to the ground and touched her cheek. Bet you can't catch me, Micron whispered, pulling back from the embrace as he began to run towards the lake, stripping off his vest, shirt, and boots as he went. Ari took this as a challenge and chased after him, pulling her tank top, boots, and pants off before diving into the lake after her husband. She swam out to the middle, where she thought her husband was, but she didn't see him. She moved around the lake, calling his name, growing worried as the minutes passed, but he didn't resurface. Mick! She called. Suddenly, a pair of arms grabbed her from behind and squeezed her tightly. and a pair of lips grazed the back of her neck. She turned around to find her husband behind her, grinning. "Nerf herder," she swore, punching him in the arm. "You had me worried." Mick grinned. "You? Worried?" He laughed as she splashed water at him in response to his joke. He pulled her close and kissed her, holding her in the cool water. He pushed her wet hair out of her eyes and kissed her again. She grew quiet, and Mick gave her a look. "What I meant to say is that I'm really not that strong. No matter how I try, I'm still holding on. And here's the honest truth. I'm still in love with you. That's what I really meant to say." Ari breathed as Mick kissed her again, deeper this time and more passionately. Aboard New Hope, Einar sat in the officers' lounge, watching the assembled fleet. They were still outnumbered 3-1, and Einar couldn't shake the feeling of despair whispering to him. He knew they would lose this battle, even with the incoming reinforcements. He poured himself some ruby bleals and took a sip, watching a squadron of X-Wings fly past the viewport. He felt it in the Force. He'd felt it for days. He had hoped the addition of the Jansari fleet would change something, but he knew now they would be nothing but cannon fodder without something drastic. "You know what you have to do," Einar said to no one in particular as he took another sip of his drink. "You better lay off the booze, mate. You're starting to talk to yourself." Einar looked up to see Brink enter the room, grinning. "Would you mind if I took a seat?" Einar smiled and pulled out the chair for him. "I haven't been able to catch up with you since I heard you were joining us. How have you been?" "You know me. As long as there's a bar and a fight around the corner, I'm happy as a Corellian huckbat," Brink told him with a smile. Einar grinned. "Hey, Brink, don't suppose you know if we still carry some shadow bombs?" Brink looked over at him, raising an eyebrow. "Well, I know Mick still carries some in the Firebird. Why?" Einar nodded and finished his drink. "I'm sorry." Brink looked surprised. "For what?" Einar sprang from his chair and grabbed Brink's arm before laying his palm on the other man's forehead. He sent the force flowing into Brink after a moment. "Forget our discussion," Einar whispered in Brink's ear as Brink's consciousness left him. Einar looked around and was happy to see that no one had been around to see the incident. He picked up the bottle of ruby bleals, took one sip, and placed it in Brink's hand. "I'm sorry," he said as they left the room. He knew what he had to do. Einar slowly made his way to the hangar where the Firebird and the captured Sith fighter were berthed. "Sorry, sir. No one is supposed to enter without Captain Din's orders," the young security guard said, raising his hand. "That's okay. I have his written orders right here that allow me access to the bay," Einar said. He fumbled around in his pocket, then pulled his hand out of his robe and projected the illusion into the guard's mind that his hand contained Mick's orders. The security guard seemed to freeze for a moment and then blinked. "Yes, sir. Right this way," he said before opening the hatch. "Thank you. Now forget." The guard froze again and then shut the hatch, not remembering what had happened for the past few minutes. A few droids were scattered around the hangar, making minor repairs. "You and you, come over here," Einar said, calling for an old astromech non-binary load lifter. "You will assist me in removing the shadow bombs from that old Corellian freighter to the fighter over there." The little droid chirped something that sounded like a yes to Einar, and the loader said nothing. It was not surprising, since he had as much intelligence as a toaster. The two droids spoke in binary for a few seconds, then unloaded the bombs from Mick's ship and carefully transferred them to the Sith fighter. Man, he's not going to be happy about this. Half an hour later, the job was complete, and the droids entered standby mode. Einar made his way over to the Sith fighter and looked it over carefully. He'd not logged a single hour in this thing, he just hoped he could fly it. He had just over a week until the two fleets would meet in battle. That should be enough time to reach Nalhutta, pay his debt, and then head to Mist. He just hoped that that old scoundrel was still on Nalhutta. Sorry. Einar climbed into the fighter and strapped himself in as he switched on the computer. "I just hope they go for this." He opened a comm channel to New Hope's bridge deck. "This is Master Alderaan in the main hangar. I need you to open the hangar bay doors. I'm taking the new toy out for a spin." "Master Alderaan, this is highly unusual. I have no flight plan listed." Come on, guys, I wanted to take her out for a spin. Just around the block, Einar responded. He was starting to sweat. If this didn't work, he wasn't going anywhere. All right, just between us. Just bring her back in one piece. Einar smiled and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Will do. See you in a few. He cut the channel and watched the hangar bay doors open slowly, revealing the blackness of space beyond. He brought the Sith fighter out and waited until he was outside of the range of the tractor beams. Bringing the hyperdrive online, he punched in the coordinates for Nalhada. Sorry, guys. I hope you understand, he said, and then he pulled the lever. It was Stefan's turn for bridge duty, and he kept looking over all the stations and ensuring everyone was getting used to the equipment. Something he wasn't used to, but he'd taken part in enough operations on board Valkyrie that he could help everyone else out. How's the Cap doing out there? He asked the Jedi how they had been working at flight ops. Fine so far, the younger Jedi told him as Stefan looked over the screen and all the fighters. Wait a moment, he said as he tapped a contact and the ID came up so he could read it. Who in the Force is taking the Sith fighter out? Master Alderaan said he'd been given permission to test it, the other said, drawing a glare from Stefan. And you didn't even bother to inform anyone he was taking it out? Stefan said as he pulled up the scanner information. Spast, and he's already out of tractor range. Einar, come back to... Sorry, guys. Hope you understand, he heard Einar's voice over the channel. Who the hell let him into the bay in the first place? Mick asked the Jedi who had taken charge of security. The guard doesn't remember anything, he said as Stefan mulled it over. He spent a year on Barab, Stefan told them both. He certainly had time to expand his abilities in the Force. Influencing a Jedi's mind isn't entirely impossible, but it takes a great deal of control, which he obviously has now. And we have another problem, Mick told Stefan as he dismissed the guard. He took half my complement of shadow bombs to load up in the fighter. Do we have enough beryllium here for what we're planning? I've got Dylan out to bring all the shadow bombs I have stored right now, Stefan told him. But I don't think we have to worry about Einar. I don't mean to sound negative, Stefan, but you know that there have been some reservations about him. And I know I've had a few myself, but you've got to have faith in him. All right, Mick said as he ran his fingers through his hair. Why did he take it armed with shadow bombs? I've got a pretty good idea, but I can't be sure, Stefan told him as he tried to think about who was missing in the room. Where's Brink? And that's the end of the chapter. All right. It is... Oh, it's only 9:30. Cool. It is 9:30. Alright, let's see what we got here. We have... Oh, I see an Obi-Wan Jacoby snuck in. Just as I'm finishing up for the evening. Let's see if there's anybody that I can raid into. Let's see. You know, actually, you know what? I might forego raiding tonight. I usually like to help support other streamers, but I'm actually pretty tired. So I think that I'm going to just call it here. For Tubba and Ajao and Zoo, if you're still here, please reach out to me on Discord so I can connect with you. And I will see you guys again. Give me 1 second, I'll check. Gosh, brain. Take a look real quick. So my next stream is actually going to be not until the next scheduled one is the 14th. I may try to squeeze a stream in sometime next week, but unfortunately it will not be Wednesday due to a commitment that came up in regards to my trip in August. So I had to unfortunately cancel stream on the 10th, which is the next Wednesday. So I will try and let everybody know in Discord when I will be able to stream again. So please keep an eye on Discord. Thank you everyone who was here this evening, and thank you so much for keeping me company. I hope you have a good evening and a great rest of your week. And if you have the day off tomorrow, please be safe. And if you are at work, definitely please be safe. Take care of yourselves. And I hope you have a good rest of your week. Thanks so much. Have a good night. Oh, it would help if I actually typed it correctly. There we go. Have a good night, everybody.